started off life as a red automatic. I hate red, hate automatics. We went and converted it over to a 6-speed and painted it silver. Although we're gonna have to change the paint on it because we're gonna fit some massive tires under the back to try to hold this 1,000 horsepower that we're gonna make with this car. The goals for this car, 1,000 horsepower, low 10-second quarter-mile times, first time out on street tires, and it needs to go 1G lateral, so it's gonna be the all-around baddest car out there. Rough neighborhood out here, man, rough neighborhood. We took the engine out, we took the transmission out, we took most of the engine wiring harness out, we took every non-essential out, and we're going to put everything in brand new, only race-ready parts that we feel are absolutely necessary. Because Project Soup Dog is a real race car and we're under extreme time constraints, we already took the liberty of fitting in a really nice chrome moly roll cage that we designed here at the shop. Besides being NHRA certified to about $8.99 in the quarter mile, we also made it specifically so it picks up and triangulates the suspension points on the rear subframe, so this thing should go nice and straight in the quarter mile and should go really fast through the road course. We also put a fuel safe 22-gallon fuel cell in the back, so it should be nice and safe and we'll have plenty of fuel for the track. While this thing's at the body shop, we're going to start off with the engine. We've got plenty of machining to do. We've got a bare block. Let's take a look in the clean room, see what we got to begin with. This is what I'm talking about. This is the way to start off a project car. 3-liter Toyota inline-6 2JZ GTE cast iron stout. We're gonna have to fit this block with the strongest components that we could find in the industry. Each one of them is gonna have to be custom fit for this particular block. Alright, we just got our block back from the machine shop. We spent all last night getting this thing cleaned and prepared with hot soapy water. The car is still at the body shop. It's going to be there for a few more weeks, but hopefully when it gets back, we'll have an assembled engine ready to drop right in that dog. You know we can't wait 2 weeks while that thing's at the body shop. We got to get cracking now. We have no time to build this project. So some of the stuff that our machinist did was he decked the surface here to make sure we get a really good head gasket seal, bored and home the cylinders to accept our new Arius pistons, made sure everything was high-speed balanced, perfect, ready for assembly. All we got to do is clean, inspect everything, and we're going to start that right now. The crankshaft main bolts are these guys right here. We replace them with a stud. How this thing works, sits in the main here, but what you'd lose is this thing will bind up on the top here when you're trying to torque it down, and you'll get a pretty much inaccurate torque reading on the bottom of this thing. So all these fasteners throughout the entire thing could be a little inaccurate, and we don't need that. Plus, when you back these things out or not, because the whole entire shaft has to twist, you lose a lot of strength in this thing. It's inaccurate and it's not very serviceable because it twists a lot. So we change that over to a stud. When you put a stud in there, the stud gets mechanically threaded into the block like Grim's doing right here. Only this little piece will stick out from the top. All we have to do is we get a nice high quality nut and washer that goes on there, and it makes it really serviceable. You can take them on and off. But more importantly, all the torque readings are right snapped up here on the top, and they're all equal throughout the whole entire thing. It's our factory main cap. It's pretty stout. It's good for a couple hundred. Throw in the garbage as usual. We got these from Program Engineering. They're billet steel, insanely strong, and it's exactly what we need for our bulletproof bottom end. And this is our factory Toyota Supra rod here, and it's pretty cute. It'll do for a couple hundred horsepower just like everything else, so we're going to have to throw it to the curb. The bearing from factory Toyota is very susceptible to damage. It's out of here. And these rinky-dink rod bolts, no good. Everything out of here. What we got to replace it with is this really trick Carrillo H-beam, which is pretty much indestructible unless we go ahead and detonate it. Other than that, it's going to be indestructible. And our own very special rod bearing right here, which is proprietary for us here at the shop. This jammy right here is about 760 thousandths wide, the factory one, and our upgraded bearing is about 940 thousandths wide. And what that's going to mean is when our oil pressure is supporting loads on these rods, we have a much larger footprint, so we get a lot more capacity for oil film to build up there, so it should support a lot more power. We're about to put our 6 rods and piston combination together. I've already got the spiral locks in on one side to ease my assembly just a little bit. Put a little lube on our wrist pin. All right, that one went in real nice and smooth. The Project Soup Dog is very special, and we need to file fit each one of these piston rings specifically for the cylinder, and each one of them needs to be done by hand to a specific tolerance that we've already come up with. This top ring, for example, I'm going to set it in here I'm going to use this piston mocked up with a number 2 ring on it just to set it in here straight. Then I can get a nice accurate gap measurement, ring gap measurement. And this guy right here is measuring up at about, it's like a tight 11 thousandths. I want it to be more in the lines of 14 thousandths, so we're gonna have to file a couple thousandths off of this ring right here. We're gonna have to do this for each one of these cylinders, for the 2 top rings, and maybe even the oil control ring too. We've got all of our rings checked, and they've all matched up to each individual cylinder. All right, so boom. We've got our bottom end assembled. I'm excited, man. We still got a ton of work to do on Project Soup Dog. What do we got to do? We got to do everything.
We got to build the entire car, but the next time you see us, we'll be here putting the cylinder head on, putting the cams in, and degreeing the motor, which is going to be pretty exciting stuff.
Definitely. And, you know, we got our foundation for big horsepower, making a big-ass project car, and it looks good.
I'm happy we got a bottom end. It's exciting stuff.
Let's take lunch, and we'll get back to work.
Dirt, rocks, mud, and even more dirt.
All right, people, welcome back to Project Soup Dog. I am Mark. I'm Eric. Yo, we have already assembled our bulletproof bottom end. Now, remember, we're looking for 1,000 horsepower here, so we began by using Aries pistons, Carrillo connecting rods. This thing has got to be stout. It is ready to go. Today's show, we're going to put the cylinder head on. We're going to degree the cams, which would be really trick, and I'm going to start by installing these high-quality head studs from ARP. Now, while he does that, let me show you guys what we did to the cylinder head, because believe me, it is super trick. Check this out. We took our cylinder head and sent it to the best, Darryl Cox Racing. Now, Darryl and Jay Chrisley have ported and polished the head, set it up for us here, and they have actually gone beyond flow bench testing and have gone to sonic testing the cylinder heads. In keeping with using the best products and materials that we can on Project Soup Dog here, we contacted Racing Engine Valves, REV, for all of our valve tray needs. Now, what they sent us was a dual valve spring, titanium locator and retainer setup here, and we went with 1mm oversized intake and exhaust valves. The intake valves are super trick. We got titanium intake valves here. Now, the titanium is substantially lighter than the factory or a stainless steel valve, and it's got a heat threshold of 1300 degrees Fahrenheit. The exhaust valve is also super trick here. It's a super alloy called Pyromat 31. It's got a heat threshold of 2250 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, both these valves are swirl polished to help promote atomization of our fuel-air mixture. Now, this is super trick because we've got 1mm oversized valves on both the intake and the exhaust. We went from a single valve spring to a dual valve spring. You think that would all add up to weight, but with our exotic materials from Rev here, we've saved over a ½ pound in valve train components. That is a lot. Now, this is the actual head that Darryl Cox did for the Project Soup Dog here, and the valves are super trick, but the valve job is super trick also. Check this out. Now, we had Blake Gann do a full radius 30 valve job here, which opens up the area around the valve to promote more airflow into the cylinders here. The more air we can put into the engine, the more fuel we can put into the engine, the more power we can make with the engine, which, of course, is the ultimate goal of this whole project here. Now, here's a little tip for you Supra owners at home. If you're going to put head studs in here like we're doing today, you'll find out if you go to put the head on top of the engine without putting the washers in beforehand, they're not going to fit and you're going to have to take it off. So put an ample amount of grease on it, stick it down in there, let it sit there, put the head on with the washers on first. All right, we just put our head on. Now that head gasket, we're using a factory Toyota head gasket, and that by far is the most important seal in the entire engine, so we had to ensure that both mating surfaces were perfectly clean before we put this on. And now we got all of our hardware lubed up nicely, and we're going to start to install it and get ready to torque this head down properly. And this thing will be on for real. These fasteners that we're using on the cylinder head here, they have a tensile strength of 190,000 PSI. And in order for them to be working at their maximum potential, they need to be torqued down to 70 foot-pounds. In order for our torque reading to be as accurate as possible, it's important that I try to hold back on the engine so that it doesn't move around a whole lot while he's torquing it down. This is really critical, being that this is the most important gasket pretty much in the entire engine. If this thing fails, our race day is over. All right, we've got our cylinder head on, torqued on nicely. Next step is to drop the cams in, and before I do that, I'm going to put some of this special lubricant supplied by Crower with their camshafts. And the idea behind this is it's going to have to sit on an engine stand for a little while before we go to start it up. And when we do go to initially start it up, it may take a minute or two before we get good oil pressure while we're cranking this thing. And if the lubricant was cheap, it would end up in the oil pan, and that would do us no good. We'd have metal on metal contact. No matter how many hundreds of times you do this, always consult the book, because you can never be too right. All right, so our crankshaft is on TDC. The marks line up here on the bottom. TDC number 1 cylinder. Exhaust cam is lined up with the top here. Intake cam is lined up with the top. There's no slack on the drive side, being that this engine spins clockwise. So this is the slack on the reverse side. It's taken up by the tensioner. We're going to pull the pin like a grenade, and that's it. We have tension, and our timing belt is in effect. All right, this is the good stuff right here. This is something that I've never seen on television before, and I've been watching automotive programs my entire life. We're going to degree an engine and show you guys what the hell we're talking about when we say degree an engine. And what we're going to do now is we're going to control the time when the intake and exhaust valves open and close in relationship to top dead center. Crankshaft is at TDC number 1. I have a little piece of welding wire right here on my degree wheel, which represents 360 degrees of crankshaft rotation. It's at TDC number 1, and the cam gears are stock settings right here, straight up and down. So we put everything on just the way it is, and we're going to see when does this intake valve open up. In the United States, we always measure valve opening at 50 thousandths inches of lift. So while I sweep through here, and the gauge starts to move, there's our 50 thousandths of lift. Now the valve is open 50 thousandths of an inch, been acted on by the camshaft. When is it happening? It's 5, 6, 7, almost 8 degrees after top dead center. The cam card that came with these stage 3 Crowler cams wanted this thing open, I believe, 8 degrees before top dead center. So we're way off. We got to make a major change. If we want this to happen 8 degrees before top dead center, we're going to put it 10, 9, 8 degrees before top dead center. Now we're going to make a move on the camshaft. This is where I want it to open, 8 degrees before top dead center. So it needs to be advanced a lot. So unlock these jammies. How we do this is we put the crank where we want it, and we move the cam over to our 50 thousandths inches of lift. Where are we at? 5, 6, 7 degrees before TDC. I could move it another degree, but I'm going to be happy with that. And that means that our intake cam is now degreed to the specs that the Crowler cams came with. So we're going to move this rig now over to the exhaust cam. We're going to do the same thing on that side. We're going to see what we come up with. We're going to get these guys dialed in perfectly. This is what we ended up with here. The intake valve is opening 7 degrees before top dead center. The exhaust valve is closing 5 degrees after top dead center. That's going to give us a time period of 12 degrees when the intake valve and the exhaust valve are open at the same time. Now this is happening right when the exhaust valve is about to close. The intake valve starts to open up, and what happens is the inertia of the exhaust leaving the cylinder head actually jerks a little clean, fresh air and fuel mixture in there, makes nice high-end horsepower. Might not be the most emissions-friendly setup available, but it sure is going to make us good horsepower. Details, our boy Brian Kono, who's got the bodywork under control on the car. He's been working feverishly trying to get that thing ready. We also sent a bunch of engine parts with him so we can paint those things. And he should be running through here any second now, bringing some cool stuff. And
hey, how you doing?
Brian Kono.
From After Hours.
Yeah. Oh, that is pretty, man. Let's see how this thing looks right here, man. Oh, that looks pretty. Welcome back to Project Soup Dog. As you guys already know, if you've been watching, we've got our race engine assembled here, and we've been waiting on one critical component, the car. It's been stuck at After Hours Automotive for the last 2 or 3 weeks. Brian has been working around the clock to fit this Extreme Dimensions wide body kit on the car, and he had to actually custom modify it to fit over these giant Kinesis rims and Toyo tires. Now, this car here has got about a week before we need to light the match to this thing and be doing smoky, fiery burnouts. So we've assembled a team of talented people who are going to help us out here. We've got Hong Kong Frank, we've got G from Motec, who's going to be in charge of the wiring. Also, this is going to be edited on TV, so we might miss some little things. So we've got Super Street here, who's going to cover the build-up in detail. We've got Rick Daddy in the house, snapping photos all day. It's going to show up in the November issue of Super Street and carry on from there on out. Let's take a look at some of these outrageous products we're going to be putting on this car. And we'll start off with the clutch. The clutch is from Tilton. This is a carbon unit. It weighs 14 pounds, including the flywheel. It'll hold 1,200 foot-pounds of torque. This is the most winningest clutch on the planet, from Formula One to Le Mans import drag racing. The turbos are from Innovative. They're dual ball bearing units. They're T3, T4 hybrids, including Pro Gates and Inconel heat shields. The brakes are from StopTech. They're 14-inch, 4 pistons all around. They're monstrous. These are proven to be the real deal. The drive shaft is from ACPT. It's made of carbon fiber. It's extremely durable and extremely light. The shocks are from Penske Racing. They're model 8600, 14 by 14 way adjustable with remote reservoir, supported by iBox springs. Penske, as in Roger Penske. Enough said. For engine management and data acquisition, we need something serious, and it is from Motec. The intake manifold is outrageous. This thing is a blend of cutting-edge machining and old-world craftsmanship. The guys over at FabWorks and Team Spencer made this thing from a flat sheet of aluminum and a whole bunch of CNC action. We designed it here at the shop. They built it over there. I can't say enough about it. When you have a car that is as heavy as a Supra, this car is not going to be too light, and you're going to make as much power that we're going to make, you have really no choice but to put a clutch like this tilting carbon on it. The more heat that you put into it, the more heat that it sees, the more that it grips, which is the exact opposite of any other conventional clutch on the planet. And this clutch, this little tiny, little 14-pound assembly can handle 1,200 foot-pounds of torque all day, laugh at it, and do it a whole season without needing to be rebuilt. Before this clutch came along, when we were racing these cars professionally, sometimes we changed 4 or 5 clutches a day. After this thing came out, we could leave it in for 2, 3, 4 weekends, pull it out, inspect it, put it right back in. Now we're moving on to the installation of the StopTech brakes. Now, we hosted the Sport Compact Car Ultimate Street Car Challenge video this last year, and the overall braking winner was a Toyota Supra, and it was using StopTech. So we had found out a little bit more about how they work, and what they do basically is they proportion the brakes for the amount of fluid that your master cylinder actually displaces. So instead of just bolting on a giant brake kit from like a Ferrari or a Porsche, they actually set it up for what your car is able to push through the master cylinder. Anything that works on the racetrack, I'm a happy man with. Rotors are 2-piece, nice and light, but giant at the same time. Racetrack proven. The only way to go. And besides, it looks badass too. We're not up to bleeding the brakes yet, but just as a tip for you guys at home, when you're going to start bleeding your brake system, when you change every brake, you got to make sure, number one, that your master cylinder is pulled up and filled to the top. So pull the top off of it, make sure it's filled. Start with the brake that is farthest away from the master cylinder, that's the passenger side rear, and work your way up as the farthest away, second farthest, third farthest, and then closer to the master cylinder. So that way you get all the air out of the line, and then go and start at the back, do it again. Make sure that it's dead on. All right. Now these rims are light, they're really good looking, but they're also pretty special too. Let me tell you a little bit about them. Just like everything else in the project car, the rims got to be custom made too. Now we contacted Kinesis, and these guys normally found on Ferraris and Porsches, high-end exotics. They can do pretty much any offset that you want to fit behind any brake setup, or any width that you want up to 13 inches. They can polish the rims to look like this, they can brush them to look like this, or they can do other things in the middle. What we wanted was a black rim that would stand out great against a silver car. So they polished it and anodized it, and it looks smoking. K28 Kinesis, polished, anodized. And this is exciting right here, man. We'll finally get to put the engine in this dog. You know, we put a lot of love into the engine, a lot of really nasty parts into there. It's a really stout piece. You know, all the components in there, the cylinder head, the cams, it's the pistons, the rods, the attention to detail inside the engine. You know, I'm really proud of it, and you know, I can't wait to have this thing make some serious power right here. And just being able to slide this thing into this car today that Brian Kono at After Hours worked so hard, making his body look beautiful. You know, I mean, it's exciting just to be able to drop this thing in here. Because as soon as we get this thing in here, we can start putting accessories on it, turbo header, intake manifold, start running plumbing, start fabricating intercooler pipes. So this is the big one right here. It's a big move. Yo, this looks outrageous, man. We just mocked everything up in here to make sure that it fits, but the real reason we did it is because we needed to see how this is gonna look, and we couldn't wait. Just couldn't wait. Needed to see what the, get an idea what the finished product is gonna look like, and I think it's making me excited, actually. Yeah, I'm indicating north. This looks outrageous. All right, G, we got this thing mocked up here. Now you ready for Motec wiring magic here?
Yeah, we're just gonna size up, verify some lengths on a one-off harness that we already have. Based on the fact we got a lot of one-off components on this, want to make sure we get the fit exact. It's going to be a Taylor handmade harness. All right, so now that we have the turbos mocked up, where do you want to mount the wastegates?
The wastegate actuator is going to be somewhere over here.
Okay, so we can come out of the firewall, route it around here.
Yeah, trick.
Okay, so
Keep that simple.
excellent.
And then the igniters are also going to be over there.
We're gonna mount the igniters, as well as we'll run the fan wires down along the frame for the controlling of the fan.
Alternate? No, we're going to go to the top for the alternate.
Right, we're gonna run the harness along the back side behind the engine. We'll have transition that hides all the coil wires. We'll come down, hit the alternator, the crank trigger, which the crank trigger is gonna be a shielded wire
Right.
to keep all the noise out. We're gonna take the measurements today, go back to Motec and put it on the bench, have a handmade harness, bench tested, guarantee the drop right in, everything will work. We're ready to meet our deadline for next Friday.
Absolutely, man. You know, these guys at ACPT did a beautiful job on this thing. It's light as hell, too.
Yeah, this thing is bang up looking.
Okay, man. We got a lot of work to do to make this happen. Lots of sleepless nights. Lots of sleepless nights. We're going to be staying at the shop here, probably. But hopefully next time you see this thing, we're going to be lighting a match to it, and it will be barking and shooting fire. So stay tuned. All right, we are here. This is D-Day. This is the day we've all been waiting for. Can you believe we got this thing back from the body shop exactly 1 week ago today at about 6 o'clock in the morning? We dragged it back here as a roller. It didn't have anything in it. It didn't have a motor, didn't have a transmission, didn't have a wire in it, cooling system, intercooler system, fuel system, nothing. We've had our team work on this thing pretty much round the clock. We've been busting our butts to get it to here, and we are just about to fire this thing off. But before we do that, we got to do a full electronic system checks with the Motec system, make sure everything is working good. We got to check for fuel leaks, make sure we don't have any of those. That could be a big problem. And then we got to do a proper oil pressure startup procedure before we light this thing off, and we're going to go to it right now. I'll start you off here underneath the hood with a quick rundown of what we got going on here. We did all of the vacuum lines here in Nomex with aluminum AN fittings. Now, all of this is for the boost controller for the Motec system. Now normally this would be just a vacuum hose here with a little hose barb on it, but we went the extra mile and drilled and tapped and made these distribution blocks here so that we don't have the ability of a hose popping off anywhere in the system. That would be hard to get at. So we've eliminated that problem there. This stuff is Nomex. It's fireproof. It's what they make safety suits out of, like fireproof suits. Really cool stuff here. This is the igniters for the Motec here, the barrel sensor for the Motec system here. Moving along this car, you can see the top of the Penske shocks here. And we got obviously our twin innovative ball bearing turbos on our Twins Turbo header here. Really bitchin'. We got these alloy racing covers here, which is really cool. These are Inconel turbine heat shields, custom made for this setup here. Really, really trick stuff. Got a giant PWR radiator on here. Got giant Spall fans. Got an ATI crank dampener. You guys have seen what's inside the engine. You know it's all good stuff. The intake manifold here is insane. This thing is all custom, handmade here. There's about 6 weeks of work on this thing. It's incredible. This is an innovative core. It's 12 inches high, 2 feet wide, 4.5 inches deep, and Kaz made these end tanks for it here. We had Brian Kono notch the frame here so that we could bring our intercooler pipes all the way up so that we'd have a shorter run into the intake manifold and from the turbos into the intercooler. This is the fuel pressure regulator from Weldon. How the fuel system works is we have a Weldon pump in the back that's feeding a dash 10 onto each side of the rail, one there and one here. We've got a dash 8 return line and another dash 8 return line coming out of the rail, going into the Weldon regulator, and then a dash 8 all the way back into the fuel safe cell. And that's the complete fuel system on the car. You know, my brother just got finished telling you guys that everything was custom made for this car. If it wasn't made by the manufacturer for it, it was made right here in the shop. And anytime you see a weld in this car, you know that I did it myself, and I do it with my single wave 350, my baby. And if you guys at home don't have access to a machine like this and cannot weld, what you want to look for when you have somebody weld some aluminum for you is that you get good penetration so that it doesn't blow up. It should be dripping through on the inside a little bit, and you should have a nice, pretty looking bead like that should end up looking like a stack of shiny dimes. If you can make wiring into a work of art, this guy at Motec pulled it off, and he does it every day for a living. It's so beautiful of a harness, we needed to look at it before we put it in the car. So we laid it out on the floor and just took a step back and looked at it. It is absolutely a work of art. It's almost a shame to put it into the car. This thing runs on sequential injection and sequential ignition. There's a timed event for each firing of the injector and each firing of the plug. If you were to mix up one of those wires, it would cause a catastrophic engine failure, hands down. You've slept 4 hours now in the last 48 cars.
Yes, that explains my absolute delirium.
You get to a point where you're running out of energy and it's like, man, this is beating the crap out of me. But then you get to a point where you hear the car turn over and light off a little bit and boom, a little exhaust note and boom, right back up on the pipe, energy, deluxe, adrenaline running for the next couple hours after that.
Coffee doesn't hurt either.
We're going to get some oil pressure. These guys are going to be measuring cylinder pressure. They're going to try to set the CRIP, which is the crank reference indicating position, correct?
Yeah, we gotta basically tell the ECU where the crankshaft is.
Right. See, because everything is always a little bit different, it's really important that we get the timing right as far as when the plug fires in relationship to TDC. So we need to set that CRIP right now. Crank reference indicating position.
Disconnect the ignition modules just so there's no way we can get a spark while we're just trying to get oil pressure.
It's like 2 degrees off, if anything. Really close. It's probably close enough to start. I'd say so.
Yo, gentlemen, are you guys ready to do this for real? All right, let's do this. You got a wastegate spring in here, and it basically sets the seat pressure at which the spring will release at, and this is about a 9-pound spring in there. So the added boost pressure that's going to the top added onto the 9-pound spring dictates the wastegate operation. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna cram that down there so that that wastegate does not want to open until the very last second in which the boost controller, the Motec, tells it to open. So that way we get all the boost available. All right, it's been a while. I can't wait. We're all really excited. It's time to do the startup procedure, and we're gonna hear this thing live any minute now. Right after we start up an engine for the first time, or after we get back from a racetrack, we cut open the oil filter, see what's going on the inside. This way we could get a good idea if there's any engine damage that's taking place that we would not normally know about. I could also get a good idea of the condition of the engine without actually taking it apart and inspecting the bearings and the piston rings, because if there's something going wrong with them, they'll be in here in the oil filter. We use conventional junk oil when we start up an engine for the first time. Synthetic oil is actually too slippery and doesn't allow an engine to break in properly. So your regular non-synthetic El Cheapo oil is perfect for the first couple hundred miles. After the engine sees about 1,500 miles, you could probably put synthetic into it. It should be broken in by then, and then you can really start to lean on it.
Twins Turbo, these guys are Supra gurus from way back. They've been doing it pretty much, that's why we wanted to get involved with them, was they know Supras better than anyone else, so we sort of adopted the project, and this is my first time seeing it. It's impressive, I mean, to say the least. We're calling it the Triple Crown project. It's 1,010-1, which is 1,000 horsepower, 10-second barrier in a quarter mile, and 1 G on the skid pad, 1 lateral G, which is pretty rare for a Supra because a lot of Supras you can't get them to handle too.
You know, Super Tuner TV is reality TV for the automotive junkie. Yeah, the reality is we spent the last 6 days and nights here at our shop assembling this car from a roller to this beast that you see sitting in front of you here today. Now, the reason we did that is so that you, the home viewer, could follow us through the whole project.
We made 500 horsepower at only 10 pounds of boost on the Dynapack. That's to the tire. We gotta wait a while to season the engine before we can turn it up real good. All that action is gonna take place in Super Street Magazine and on superstreetonline.com.
Make sure not to miss it. Until then, we are out of here.